Hello everyone, welcome back to the Hanuman Healing Hour. I am Jaitra, your host. I have a very beautiful guest with us today. Somebody who I've had a lot of contact with on Facebook, and just the way that he shows spirit, the way that he is devoted to God is a beautiful thing for me. A lot of times I try to find us guests who have, different paths, different ideas. This time it is somebody who is very much on our path, on the Shanta Dharma, the Hanuman path, right? Really, without any further ado, Ryan Garcia, Danta, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing wonderful. It's great to be here with you, man. So thank you for having me on. It's a real pleasure. Thank you.
Always. So for the guests, do you mind kind of telling them a little bit of your background, who you are, how you maybe got onto this Shanta Dharma experience or journey, or,
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from West Texas, a town called San Angelo. It's a small, quaint little town. Grew up here, spent all of my life here until I was 18. Went off to college, to the University of Texas, and there I earned 2 degrees, one in evolutionary biology and one in business management. So kind of giving you background on that, I think I've always been, or I know I've always been a seeker. I've always wanted to know what the deeper sense of my reality was. So hence why I majored in evolutionary biology, because at the time, and it does, evolution explains like the deep mechanisms of how life changes over time. And I just found that extremely fascinating. But growing up in my mid-teens till I was about 30, 32, I was a really staunch atheist. I was very, very militant atheist. I completely denied the existence of a God because I felt that this material world was all there is.
Mm-hmm.
Science is a beautiful way of understanding. Like it's a material philosophical way, and it can be philosophical way of like understanding your surroundings. So I took that and I felt that's all I needed. But being the person that I am, I felt that there was like still this rung. There was a rung in the ladder that was missing. I felt like I was ascending and I was understanding, and I was. But I just felt like there was one rung that was missing, like for me personally. And this is not to say that because like somebody is an atheist, like they don't have a complete understanding.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to understand all the time. So I think that's what we're all here to do. I think we're all here to resolve this human condition for whatever and however we find ourselves, and not taking it too hard on the process, and not trying to either poke holes in it, rather receive it gently, as if you're catching this egg. If somebody throws an egg at you, like you kind of go with it, you give a little with it. Right. And I felt like that approach has given me like deeper insight into myself, and to other people, and it's just given me this great peace that material like mechanisms don't afford me.
Right.
So that's the basis of my background, and I came to this lineage through that.
Right.
When I went off to college, I thought I was the smartest guy, and I was like reading books on philosophy, reading all the pop science books, Stephen Hawking, Carl Sagan, you name it, I was reading it. I was introduced to a lot of people who were a lot smarter than me, and that really humbled me very quickly. And as I was learning about different philosophies, and I was learning about, natural sciences, and studying it in class, I have always like questioned like this deeper thing. Like I never took like a deep philosophy class. I had only read books. So I was doing my own learning about myself. I was trying to strengthen my atheism. And through trying to strengthen my atheism, I was brought to Buddhism. And because I felt that when I was an atheist, I felt like I had something to defend. I felt like I had to tear down ideas. So I would love debates. I would love to debate people and instead of the error in, I think, my approach, not saying that atheism is a wrong approach, but my personal approach as Danta Brian Garcia, my error was I wasn't leaving the people I was debating with any better than I found them, right? I wasn't bringing any knowledge any like helpful knowledge to the table. Like, it was only ad hominem attacks. It was trying to poke holes in what they believed. My mind was shut down. I thought I was right. I wasn't allowing anything to come in. And what I notice now, looking back on it, is that wasn't allowing them to grow or even have any kind of realization or whatever I was trying to come across. And it certainly wasn't allowing me to grow. And then I started hearing, because I had a friend, her name was Corey. She was from China. And I went to school with her. Super sweet girl. And I got to talking to her. We became really good friends. And I was like, oh, so what do you believe? Because I love to talk about religion. She said I was Buddhist. And here I am from West Texas, moving to Austin. And I didn't know anything about Buddhism.
Right.
All I knew was Christianity. And so I asked her, what is the Buddha? And she started talking about it. And my mind started like getting blown, right? I was like, whoa. I was like, wow. I was like, so Buddhists believe in God? And she's like, no, we don't really believe in God. And I was like, wait, stop. I was like, what? What do you mean you don't believe in God? I thought it was a religion. And so that just shows like the whole, this narrative that I'm telling you, it's like, I think we can all use this as a reference point to see that we're naive in all sorts of ways. Naivety isn't like a bad thing. It's like we're born with that. We don't know all things. But what do we know? We do know this experience. We don't have to know that you are experiencing to know that. I mean, you don't have to know that. Let me back up. So the experience can be distorted, just like my experience of religion was distorted.
Right.
But what is undeniable? You cannot deny that the fact that you are that experience you're experiencing now.
Right.
So Buddhism kind of brought me into that. It eased me into that you are this experience and how you deal with suffering, that suffering exists. Mm-hmm. And then I started getting deeper into that, and I was like, okay, well, who is the Buddha? And, it's like the Buddha was a Hindu, and I was like, whoa. Like, okay, now what? Right. Like, I knew the term Hinduism, and I knew Hindu, but I only knew it on a superficial level. I only knew I just, saw the talaks and the gods with many arms, but I understood nothing about it. So then I started diving into that, and I was like, wow, this is what I've always thought. Mm-hmm. This is exactly what I have been looking for. Right. So that being said, I think that all religions or any ways of knowing are individual. They're individual, and I don't believe that any religion has it all right, because I don't think you can know God through a set through a set of like practices or structure or text. Right. Because each individual comes to the table with their own like background, their own samskaras, and samskaras are, these events that your past karmas that have projected you into this like now. Right. Right. So we all have a different digestive ability to see God and how we see God. So that's where these religions start to fit people. People feel more comfortable in Christianity, or they feel more comfortable in Hinduism or Islam, or just, even Judaism. So these are all flavors of the same food. Mm-hmm. It's all food. Yeah. It is all food, but they're just different flavors, and they all nourish the body. Right. It just depends on how we can digest these things. So getting into how I came to this lineage, I was studying Hinduism. I got onto some Facebook groups that were, talking about Buddhism and Hinduism, spirituality, and I was learning, but it was only, I want to say it was, I was only absorbing like catchphrases, and I didn't understand like how do I apply those to my life? Like, God is grace. Like, how do I apply that to my life? Or you are this eternal consciousness. It's like, okay, wow, like, okay, that's great, and it makes me feel good for a little bit, but how do I go out into the world and like practice that? How do I apply that to my life? Right. How do I create this meaning? And I was lucky enough to meet our guru now, Baba Ganga Das, yeah, who I found an online community. I didn't know anything about him. I sent him a friend request, and the rest took off from there. So yeah, and so now like the teachings are deeper. I'm learning to like so to talk more specifically about I guess like how like our lineage affects like my life. Like our lineage is it's what's called Bhakti, right? It's a very Bhakti oriented lineage, and Bhakti, for those who aren't familiar with it, Bhakti is like this outward loving devotion to God. So there's ways of there, and so in Hinduism, there's many ways of knowing God. So through jnana, jnana is like through knowledge. There's meditation, Raja Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, which is an outward loving devotion. So how do we come to God? And so our lineage says specifically that the path to God is through Bhakti, and Bhakti is this outward devotion. And so as you're interfacing with God out here, and as you're giving service, that's how you are adding meaning to life, and that meaning has a deeper understanding to self, and that self then you start regressing back, and who is the self? Who am I essentially?
Yeah.
And that leads to jnana too.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's important now that we're talking about Bhakti versus Raja versus jnana versus any of these other paths, it's to say that there's no one greater or more important. They're all important. Right. They're equally important. It's like when we talk about a God, like who's the highest God, Vishnu or Shiva?
Right.
Vishnu is Shiva.
Yeah.
Shiva is Vishnu. Vishnu is Hanuman.
Right.
Hanuman is you. You are who? You are God.
Right.
Period.
Yeah.
So, I think it's important too to understand like that it's not an us versus them, and there are these structures that are built to help us understand God. That's all they are. Mm-hmm. These are ladders, in my opinion. These are ladders to the ascension and realization of God. So we should love and worship the ascension and not the ladder.
For sure. Yeah.
A lot of the times I think that, and I'm very guilty of this, a lot of the times, even still, sometimes I feel like, oh, well, my way of understanding God is just so much easier or somewhere or more thorough or whatever. But that's worshiping the ladder. That's worshiping the system or the structure. And that's, I think a lot of the times, all these debates that you find on YouTube, online, Christianity versus the atheist, all they're talking about is the ladder. And the ladder's not important. What's important is the ascension of the growth, this transformation that happens to us within that. Because all of these things, these are words and symbols and thoughts. And words are limited because words are thoughts, and thoughts are limited because thoughts come from your brain, and your brain is part of nature, which is also limiting you to see your ultimate nature. Right. So we're limited in so many ways, like through our eyes. I have to wear contacts. I'm sure I'm going to have to wear hearing aids. I'm losing my hair. So there's all these things, like even in this vessel that I think is like so perfect and that is me, that is changing and is, I'm at nature's mercy. I'm at the mercy of nature. So I can't know all things. And to be humble enough in our spiritual journey to admit that, but at the same time have this very strong sense of identity and self. Because once we identify with, I think, our true nature, which in my opinion is like this essential nature is God, I think that has to be unshakable, because to be on the spiritual path, I think it takes a very strong person. I don't care what religion or what dogma or whatever you believe. It takes a very strong person to do that, especially to hold on to or to focus your mind on these practices that help this realization. We see that all the time. People with drug addictions or childhood trauma that come to that. A lot of the times, people with that kind of background, they come to spirituality, but they don't hang out too long because the foundation isn't strong enough. And that's what I think we're all here to do, is to help each other, help them. And through the process of helping them, we are strengthening ourselves and build that strong foundation with them, and whatever they want to believe, to allow them to grow in that journey, but to release that suffering, because we want to eliminate this suffering, because suffering is that which keeps us from God.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, one way that I look at it is, and I like that you brought up addiction and things like that, because part of the show is helping people who have been in that type of lifestyle, the addiction or the trauma or, childhood trauma, right? I have a belief that there are a lot of people who are searching for something, and a lot of times things like addiction are a step in that search, right? I know for me personally, I was an addict. I've been clean for about 12 years now. I know I was looking from a young age for something, right? I called it God for a little while. I, like you, called it the Buddha for a little while. There was a period in my early 20s where I called it the American Republican system or Democratic system, whatever. But I was searching. I was trying to find that bigger meaning that I felt I was missing. And I think that there are certain critical steps along this path that, even if somebody is still in the middle of one of them, say a listener is in the middle of an addiction, please know that there is something on the other side of that you can get through that. You can quit whatever you're using. You can find a way to heal from that and not ever have to use again. And for me, one of those avenues to that was what we were talking about here, right? It started with getting back to my Buddhist beliefs and reevaluating who I was and how I was interacting with the world, right? Because for me, a lot of the interaction that I was doing was because I thought that I was somebody doing something, like Ram Dass talks about, right? I thought I had to take care of a family and I had to do this. And it didn't really switch in my head until I realized that I get to, right? I went through a period of that where I was very, very much in a self-harm mindset, right? I went
Mm-hmm.
through Baker Acts, I went through trying to hurt myself, things of that nature. And it wasn't until I realized that I'm here by something's grace, right? That I'm allowed to live, that I switched my lens to I get to do these things. I get to have a family. I get to interact with my kids. I get to go to work, even if I don't want to, right?
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I really love about our lineage is the broadness that I've found of its practitioners. For you, what are some of the practices maybe that you say somebody is just coming into our lineage or might be in another lineage? What are some of the practices that you may do that you see most beneficial?
So this goes exactly to what you were talking about, like these practices on what we do. And so the beautiful thing about Hinduism or Sanatana Dharma in general
Hmm.
is that there's nothing essentially like to believe. There's nothing to believe. You don't have to believe in a process to be saved because in Hinduism, or more specifically our lineage and the non-dual lineages, this is not a salvation model. Like this is not a one chance, and if you screw it up, like you're done. This is a realization model. So there's nothing for you to believe. These are principles that you can experience for yourself. Because our lineage specifically, and Advaita Vedanta and non-dual, also non-dual lineages like ours, they don't want you to believe anything. These are all do you experience this? Are you the experiencer? Yes. True. Can you deny this experience? Can you deny your experience? You can't. You can't deny that you're here experiencing. So just that fundamental, like easiness, there's no pressure. Like there's no pressure. And anybody who's suffering from anything, I don't care if it's abuse, childhood trauma, schizophrenia, all of these things, like especially like the schizophrenia, that's a good example. We can go to that in a second. But all of these things are things in our mind, right? So you're not that trauma. You are not the addict. You are not even the prom queen, and you're not even all the great things you did. You're none of those things. You are somebody who is experiencing these things. And So from the Bhakti point of view, especially from our lineage, since we are Bhaktas, we can see this suffering and these things as we're either going to transform from this, look at that, and how does this apply to my life? What does it mean to me? And how am I going to use this suffering? How am I going to transcend that? Because we have a transcendent ability. Anybody who's listening, they really need to not get lost in the vocabulary or the terminology. Don't get lost in that. Sit there and realize who you are. You are this transcendent thing. You can transcend beyond this, because just the fact that you're even thinking about something that lies beyond this reality lets you know that you aren't just this carnal animal. You aren't just this evolved sack of meat. Like, you are a result of evolution, but you are not just that. You are far bigger than that. But you are also this body. So anything you're feeling in this body, you're able to transcend that, and you're able to change. And life isn't over. We're only looking at this slice of time.
Yeah.
This is all we're looking at. Yeah. And we're identifying with this much of time.
Yeah.
And this much of God. But God is how big? God is infinite. So we need to identify with this expansive identity. And where does that exist? That exists within us. Because you are eternal. Because your body is going to change. Your life will change. Your emotions will change. The things around you, the people, everything. Everything will change. But what we need to go back to is that essential nature that we carry with us all the time, this experience and that calmness that is within us, that witness that is witness to it all. Like, oh, I'm witnessing this. I'm witnessing, what happened to me 12 years ago. But am I that?
Right.
Am I truly that? No. Am I the person that did that? That was an experience and something I did, but that is not who I am. And we're here to use these teachings in Hinduism, which is like, so seva. Seva is the term for service, right? So how do we use our lineage to create meaning to us, right? So if we're suffering through something, whether it's like failing a test, which is you can do it as small as like stubbing your toe, or childhood trauma.
Yeah.
Right? Or the passing of a loved one. Right. So how do we take the teachings from Hinduism, like Bhakti and Jnana? How do we use those? So we use those through all inclusion. So you have to be all inclusive and do no harm, and then perform service. So we're following those three tenets. We can even use those three tenets, across all religions. In Christianity. So you do service. You serve just like Jesus did. You do no harm. That's part of the 10 Commandments. And then you see all things as one. Because Jesus saw all things as one. However we want to, whatever gives us the best meaning. What gives us meaning? Meaning is how relevant something is to us, right? So why is that childhood trauma like so meaningful to us? Why is it keeping us down so hard? Because that's what's salient to us. And saliency means like, what is the most visible in your scope? What are you giving the most attention to? What is in the room? But if we can shrink that elephant down, how do we shrink that with our mind? Because where do these experiences exist? These experiences exist within our mind. So if we can understand that this trauma or this death, this pain that I'm feeling, where does it experience? Can you find it out here in the world? Point to it. You can't. You can't point to it. It exists in your mind. And that's not something you have to believe. That's something we know. So if we know these things are in our mind, we have to, and it's easier said than done.
For sure.
Right? So this is philosophical talk, but these are practices you do. So if I know these are in my mind, that's where meditation comes in. You calm your mind and you're able to shrink these down. You may not be able to erase them, but you're able to shrink them down and give that what's salient to your experience more importance. Healing. So the things you give attention to are what's going to end up growing.
Mm-hmm.
So if we give attention to our desires, that's why we suffer, because those desires are very salient to us, whether they're emotional, physical, mental, whatever these desires are. That's where we focus our attention, and that's why we suffer, because we invest our desire into that, or we invest our attention. But if we can invest our attention into our essential nature, which is God, which is this essential being that is within us, this experience, because experience never changes. You, the experiencer, is always doing something. So you have, like, I'm jumping around a bit, but
No.
it's bringing me to a couple of things. So we have three states. We have the waking state, the dream state, and the sleeping state.
Mm-hmm.
And in all of those states, one is the experiencer and something is being experienced.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the waking state. So you're the waker and then things exist while you're awake. You're the sleeper and you're experiencing sleep. You're the dreamer and you're experiencing the dream. But what is more fun, because you have duality in each of those, right? So I'm awake and I'm experiencing this waking state. I'm dreaming, I'm experiencing the dream. I'm asleep, I'm experiencing sleep.
Right.
I'm the sleeper. But what is even more fundamental to all of those? The experience.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Your experience, that's the one underlying reality of all of that, the experience. So as you do these things, as you do bhakti, which is this loving devotional to God, as you're doing seva, if I see Jaitra Das, not as Jaitra Das with a podcast and a guy who has a microphone and a guy who lives on the East Coast, but if I see you essentially, and I strip all that away, and I can see like your essential nature that you are the same thing as me. You have these fears, you have these desires, you have these wants. You want, so all of this whole canon of like human emotion that we share this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if I can look past that, I can serve you, and not because you believe in a certain thing, but because I see you as a divine being of God, this essential reality, this non-dual reality, right? So you're this fragment, you're the spark of this bonfire.
Yeah.
God is this bonfire, and you're the spark coming off of it. And there's no difference between you and me. And so if I see no difference between you and me, I don't take it so hard on you.
Right. Right.
And then that's where this love comes in. And then love builds meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And then meaning, you start becoming important to me. And then that creates this love. No matter what you did or who you are or how you identify.
Right.
So that's, in a very long way, that's how I use these practices to come to God, because it's not anything I have to believe. It's something I'm experiencing, because God is your reason. Like, so how do these teachings, how does Bhakti, how does Jesus, how do the 10 Commandments, how do all these things that people, these great saints and enlightened beings have done, how does that apply to my life? And how am I going to use that? And what does it mean to me? And then how am I going to change you? And then how am I going to change myself? How am I going to change my family? How am I going to change my community? Then that's where God is. God is all of that. And then that becomes your experience. God is my reason plus my experience. So that's essentially how I approach things and how I've used these things to help me realize God. And it's an ongoing process. And
I was going to say, to me, it's a continual. One practice I do personally is a form of Vipassana yoga, right, or Vipassana meditation. And that's we can get into that at a later time, but basically focusing one pointedly on the breath, right? So for me, I view any practice as an in-breath and an out-breath, right? I view myself, like you were saying, but at the same time, I can breathe out and I can see us. And Ram Dass talked a lot about walking each other home. And I think a lot of what you were talking about is all a process of realizing that we are the we, and that there is for a lack of a better term, metaphysical home that we are all searching for. And we are taking each other through this life and trying to show each other that I can identify with a place in me, and if you are identifying with that place in you, it's the same place. And then all of this stuff all just becomes stuff, right? For me, a lot of times I notice that worldly things, right? So you talked a lot about having desires and things like that. These concepts or things like I want a new car, or I would like to have this house, all of that is desires. And I think a big portion of my spiritual practice is realizing that those desires are not as tangible, right? You talked about how things will fall away, your age will fall away, your body will fall away. All of those desires are all things that, even if obtained, will for only a moment make me happy because it'll fall away. The car will need an oil change, the tires will need to be redone. And for my personal practice, I try to stay in constant connection with that, like you said, one thing that does not change. You know what I mean? So for me, it's a lot of, like I said, breathing in, breathing out, but on many different levels. You know, one thing that I really like about our lineage, to talk about our guru just a little bit, is the openness with allowing whoever comes to him, allowing that person to be like who they are. Right. I know quite a few of our brothers and sisters in the lineage, and the difference in between all of us is very beautiful. But for some reason, for me, all of that is, just stuff. And I really noticed that, especially the other day. Long story short, I was talking to one of our guru sisters who just had diksha, and a lot of her talking was about her life problems. And for me, like before I met Baba, like we talked about a little bit before the show, I was trying to have students, trying to be this teacher, things like that. For me, it's become more of a allowing him to flow through us type of mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was talking to her, a lot of what was said was not me. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
And I feel like you said, identifying with that's how we find
Mm-hmm.
that connection. You know what I mean? I'm curious if you have anyone in your life that you are making that connection with and things like that.
Honestly, I try to make that connection with everyone. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
Because in Hinduism, like, if you believe that everything is God, then everything you do, brushing your teeth is God, listening to music is God, getting on your computer is God, walking is God. All of these things that you don't even feel like you're so immersed. You begin to be gentle with all things, because it's like you said, it's like, wow, I'm being able to do these things. It's like the fact that I'm even here, and to like look at these hands, and to look at even the bad things that happen to me. It's like, wow, I'm here experiencing this. Like, that is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Versus not being able to experience. There's a lot of things that are happening around me that, like, I can either pay attention to the suffering and the negativity, or I can see you and all things. I can see driving my car. I can see the fact that I have an AC and I have a home, and that I have some food to eat, and I have some shoes. They may not be the best, but I have some. And that somebody was able to make all of these things, because I don't know how to make shoes, and I don't know how to spin wool. Like, all of these things are God's grace, these things that are out of our control.
Yeah.
I can't even do my own taxes.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Like,
Oh yeah.
right. Or sometimes we can't play some sort of instrument or bake cookie or whatever the case may be. We don't know how to do these things. But sometimes we feel like, oh, I'm doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing that. No, you're part of this process that is so much bigger than you. So I kind of wanted to, like, so like, you're this eternalness, but you have this body, you're this witness of this body, but you're much bigger than that. You're not just that. And like you said, a lot of the times we have like this desire. So if I sit here on this podcast and be like, well, I want to, I want to come across as this, and I want to make these points, and I want people to think like it's going to get lost.
Yeah.
Like, but we should just enjoy the process. And I use this analogy, this certain analogy I'm going to use right now. So if I let Jaitra Das borrow $10, right? You're my buddy and I love you, and you're like, hey man, I need $10 for whatever. And I'm like, yeah, man. So I hand you the $10, not because I expect to be paid back, but because I love you, and because I hope you go do something good with it, and because I see you as this piece of God. Now, if I enjoy that process of just letting you borrow money and helping out my friend and seeing you as this divine thing that I'm helping out, not as I won't be attached to the fruit, like, is he going to pay me back? When is he going to pay me back? Oh, he didn't pay me back.
Yeah.
Right? That's being attached to an outcome that doesn't even exist. What does exist? This experience of me interacting with you, interfacing with another piece of God, sharing my $10 with you.
Right. Right.
Because my $10 is your $10, right?
Yeah.
So what you do with that after that is none of my business, and I shouldn't worry about that. I should worry about the fact that I gave it to you with love and with good intention. Right? And you just talked to about like these desires, how like they lead us to suffering. And that's because of our ignorance. We're ignorant to the fact of our true nature. Like as soon as I get up from this podcast, I'm going to be like, oh, I want something to drink. Like, oh, what time is it?
Yeah.
And then that God aspect falls away for a little bit. Yeah. Right. So we're ignorant. We're always going to be ignorant to the fact of our true nature in some way. So the ignorance leads to desire, and that desire leads to karmas. Right. And then those karmas have momentum out in this life. So they can either be for the good or for the bad, or the negative. In some small or big way. We don't know. It can be in a minuscule way.
Yeah.
But they're all momentums. You can even look at karma as momentums. So our ignorance leads to desire, and our desire leads to our karmas. Right? So that's why we suffer, essentially. So what we should be doing is moving beyond karmas, moving beyond all of that, transcending all of that, and identifying with our true nature. And it's not easy. Like I said, this is a lot of philosophical talk, and people can say, and I'm sure they are. It's like, well, have your child die, and then see how non-dual and non-attached to your suffering you are. And I don't even want to think about experiencing that, because I feel that's like horrible. I don't know how I would deal with that. Even speaking here on this podcast, I don't know how I would deal with that. But we need to recognize that we do live in this dualistic reality of like love and hate, hot and cold, suffering and happiness, right? And move beyond all emotion. Doesn't mean you don't care, but you don't attach to those things. And, something as horrible as that, like that's something that is beyond my ability to grasp that amount of suffering. But understanding that we should not identify with that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And one, like you were saying with that example, one thing as of recently that the last couple of years, I would say, was seeing my dharma, or for an easier explanation, the things that are going on in my life that are happening, right? So I have a family, I have children, I have a job. All of that is the things of my life, my dharma, my personal dharma. One thing that I kind of wanted to ask you was, say for somebody who's just getting into Sanatana Dharma, or realizing that they are on this journey of self-discovery, what are some ways maybe that you could grasp what your own dharma is, right? Because one thing that really helped me was, like, I used the example of I wanted to have students and things like that. That was an idea and a concept that I saw from people who had students, right? So someone like Ram Dass, or someone who teaches people or is in that place of a teacher, realizing that wasn't necessarily my dharma. That was me idolizing someone else's dharma. What are some ways that you may use things like that to understand what your own dharma is and live through that, like through your own dharma, not someone else's dharma?
So we have two dharmas. In Hinduism, we have two dharmas. We have a dharma to God.
Yeah.
And then we have our own personal dharma. So our own personal dharma is our duties, right? So how do we fulfill our dharma was your question, right? So how do you fulfill your dharma to God? You see all things as God, and you interface with all things as such, and everything you do is a love to God. Then you have your second dharma. Your second dharma is your own svadharma, Your Svadharma is like your own duties, and Dharma means your duty or your purpose. So what is your purpose? I'm sitting here. Am I just floating through space, or is there something more to me? So I take this from John Vervaeke, which I think is, I think he summed it up in a phrase about this big. So how do you find your Dharma? You take, what do you feel if you were to, let me back up. He said, what would you want to exist even if you didn't?
Okay.
Right? Think of all the things, like if I wasn't here today, what would I want to either leave behind, or what would I want to exist? And then he finished with, what are you doing to achieve that? Right? So what do you want to see exist even though you didn't? And what are you doing to achieve that? So that's Dharma, in my opinion, summed up in a phrase about that big. Right. So what are we doing here? Am I just, should I just like stay in bed all day if God is in control? No. I have bigger things. I want my kids to know that I love them deeply. If I were to die today, I want them to know that I love them deeply. I want to make sure that people are secure. I want to make sure that my family has a home. I want to make sure my business is run well. So all of these things, and all of those things, what are those? Those are all of my duties. These are my responsibilities in my life. As a householder, as a manager, as a son, as a father, as somebody's brother, as your spiritual brother. We all have these different dharmas, and we have all these different roles for different people. So I need to have the best dharma with Jaitra Das that I can.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have the same, I shouldn't try to have the same dharma with you that you have with Baba Gangadas, or that you have with somebody else in our lineage, or even with your buddy from high school. Right? These are their roles. And that being said too, like we shouldn't interfere with other people's dharmas, and that leads to like religion. Like we shouldn't try to change people's mind on like their spiritual growth. Like if they believe in something else, Christianity or Judaism or Islam, we should just share our truths. And after that, like leave it alone. Because we're not in control of anything. We are this experience, we're this witness, and we share our truths, and we practice our own Dharma. And practicing our Dharma gives deep meaning to us. And then we kind of understand like where we stand. Our perspective just becomes like, oh, wow, here I am standing relative to that and relative to that. And this is where I stand in relation to all of these things around me. And when you understand where you stand in relation to things around you, that's when you have this great sense of meaning.
Yeah.
You're like, holy shit, man. Like I mean something because I have a relation, and this is relational to me. That's relational to me. And so my relationship to my outside world and to other people, it's like, oh, wow, I have deep meaning. So you look at people who don't have meaning. They're like, I have no meaning in life.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that stems a lot from like, okay, because you feel like you don't know where you stand in relation to other people. You don't know where you stand in relation to society. You don't understand where you stand in relation to your household, or where you stand in relation to your workplace or anything. And that's when people start losing this meaning. But once we can like look at these things and be like, okay, my relationship, I'm like relational to that, and I'm relational to that. And then all of a sudden we have this meaning. And then we become important. And I think that's what this life is about. It's like solving this human condition, understanding our relation to all things, where we stand in it, and then how we're going to affect people for the better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how people are remembered.
Right.
When we die, people don't say, oh, he had a Ferrari, he had the biggest car and Oasis collection in the world. Let's all celebrate that. No, they're going to be like, you know what? This dude fed me when I was hungry.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he let me borrow that $10 one day that helped keep my lights on, and I'll never forget him for that. And now my kids had electricity for Christmas.
Right.
Dude, all of these things, those are what matter.
Yeah.
And what are all of those things? All of those things are processes. So that's why we need to love the process.
Yeah.
People, when we die, people are going to remember, oh, he did this. They're going to remind people at the funeral of the processes that you did, not the things that you owned or how you looked. All the processes that you do, that's what people are going to talk about. So we have to be this living prayer. We have to be this living prayer, this embodiment of a process. And your whole process is your prayer. Prayer isn't putting your hands together and closing your eyes. And that's a transcendent prayer and a direct communication, like a line to God. But prayer is much bigger than that. Prayer is, like you said, prayer is Ram, prayer is Shiva, prayer is Christ expressing itself through what you think is you. And if we can see that and not, like I said, not worship the ladder, but love the ascension, because you're on your way up too, just like anybody else. Baba Gangadas may be a little bit higher than us, but we're still going.
Right.
We're still going in one direction. And are we going to get it done in this life? In my opinion, no. Who knows? Maybe not.
Right.
But that's not up to me.
Yeah.
That's up to something much bigger than me, than I can even begin to comprehend.
For sure. Yeah, and that for me, that's where the joy in it comes. Is like you said, being in the process and just being the witness of the process, not being concerned with where it's going to end or how it's going to end, or in the Gita it talks about doing what you do but not being attached to the outcome of it, right?
Yes. Yeah.
One thing that we kind of always ask, and you kind of spoke a little bit about it, kind of like our main stage question to the guests, is if today were your last day, if you realized you were dropping the body and today was the last day on this earthly realm for you, what for you would be one idea or one concept or memory that you would like to leave?
Don't be so hard on yourself, and don't be so hard on other people.
Mm.
And always tell people what they mean to you. If it's a good thing, always tell people what they mean to you. Never leave that open to chance. Never allow somebody to leave without letting them know exactly what you mean to them, because that momentum carries on. So if I plant a seed of love in you and then I disappear, that love is going to carry on somehow. There's a flame. There's an endless flame that is passed through all things all the time. And let us not extinguish that. Let us keep that alive, and let us imbue that into other people. Let us plant that into other people. Don't take it so hard on other people, and don't take it so hard on yourself. Tell people that you love them, because one day we're not going to be here. So what do we want to live on, even if we didn't?
Right.
And that's that.
Yeah.
And whether it be you or my children or my family or my mother or anybody, like truly, we have to think about that. This is not just a speaking point.
Yeah.
This is something we have to sit with. And I encourage anybody just to practice it with somebody you feel comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
Because not everybody feels comfortable, outwardly telling somebody I love you, but there's ways of telling people I love you, and forms of it, and showing people, that they're important. So that's what I would recommend. Don't be too hard on yourself, and don't be too hard on other people, essentially. And I think when we do that, the rest of human emotion comes out, because there's no defense, there's no pushback. And it's the pushback that keeps us separate.
Right.
If I come up to you and you feel like I'm a little defensive or whatever, you're gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna be a little defensive too, a little guarded. But if I just say, you know what, bro, I don't care what you did, I don't care anything, I'm not gonna take it so hard on you, don't take it so hard on me. And there's this flow that you can't even contain. Like, I probably don't even have to say anything. We could just be sitting in a room and you just know that I don't judge you.
Right.
And it's something that you can't ever, like you said, you can't make this stuff up, and you can't make it happen. It's just something that comes out of you.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's the vibration that you exhibit. You know what I mean? Well, I really want to thank you for being on. Is there,
Absolutely.
If one of the audience or anyone wanted to reach out to you or learn maybe more about our lineage, is there any social media links that you have or anything of that nature that you'd like to mention?
Yeah. So you can always find me on Facebook. It's Danta Das, Danta space DAS, or Brian Garcia, or Oasis DNA on Instagram. So yeah, everybody can always reach out to me on that. And thank you for having me on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was a true pleasure and a real honor to sit here and speak what's on my heart. So thank you for the opportunity.
For sure. Yeah. And I would again love to have you on, any
Absolutely.
other time. And I really enjoyed this. It gave me a fruit that I've kind of been looking for again. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, man, dude, that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. And I love this. And so And I love you too, man. And I want you to know that. And I want you to know that I think what you're doing here is important.
Thank you.
Even if it affects one person.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's all that matters.
That's what it's for. So. Well, I thank you so much for being on. Everyone, audience, this has been a beautiful conversation with Danta. Thank you again, my friend.
Thank you, brother. Jai Shri Ram. Jai Shri Ram.
Hello, family. This is Jaitra from the Hanuman Healing Hour. I wanted to come on and thank you for tuning in to this episode and tuning into all the episodes that you do. Your support has greatly kept me going. Just knowing that there are people that enjoy the content and enjoy the interviews makes me so happy. I do want to also announce that we are going to do 2 giveaways. The first is going to be a sticker giveaway. So a sticker and a bumper sticker from Baba's Feed Project. And then the next giveaway is going to be for the top contributor. So anyone who has the most comments or is selected from the comments, that is where we will pick them from. We will be giving away a beautiful little Om necklace, also from Baba's Feed Project. And again, I just want to thank you so much for being supportive and tuning in. Namaste.